Welcome to a series that we call the End of Times, where we're going through the book of Revelation verse by verse to try our best to see what it is we can expect to happen and what it is our roles will be in the end times, or the time Jesus refers to as the end of the age. And where we are in the book of Revelation is John has been taken up into the throne room of God, where we're given a chance to look around. He notices that God has a scroll in his hand with 7 seals. It is determined that only Jesus Christ is worthy to open that scroll. And as all 7 seals are broken, we see events take place on the earth, very tragic events caused by the evil hearts of men. And then once that scroll is opened up, what is written within that scroll is the divine coming of God's kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. And we see that in the form of 7 trumpets. And we've watched all 7 trumpets be blasted as we've gone through this book. And we finally got to the 7th trumpet at Jesus' return. And then there's a pause in the story. And we're introduced to witnesses. We're introduced to the woman who is Israel. She gives birth to a child, Jesus. We're introduced to the dragon, which is Satan. And we're told that war is broken out in heaven, and that Satan and a third of the angels have been cast down to this earth where they have been this entire time. And now we're all kind of victims to that. And then we get introduced to the beast of the sea. And that's where we're at right now. What we've learned about the beast of the sea is it is made up of 10 kings. And one of those kings will take a fatal head wound, and the world will begin to worship that man. And that's where we're at right now. We're in chapter 13, and we're just going to pick it up where we left off in verse 4. So they worshiped the dragon, who gave authority to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him?" And he was given a mouth, speaking great things and blasphemies. And he was given authority to continue 42 months. Then he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme in his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. And it was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. So what's going on with this guy? Well, let's just say he's been given authority by Satan to rule over the world. That's what's going on. Now we're gonna address this in 2 different ways. Now, first of all, it's 42 months. So this 3.5 years, we've talked about this a lot. There's a moment where he will sit in the temple of God and declare himself to be God. That's a very, very bad day for the world, specifically for those dwelling in Jerusalem. Now, that's that 3.5 year timeline. That's the timeline of tribulation. Well, what takes place during that time, and how do we know? He's speaking blasphemies. Now, we're going to kind of look into what are these blasphemies, because ultimately what's taking place is he's going to declare himself to be God, and that in itself is a blasphemy. So let's take a look at this. Now, the only reference of somebody of a historical event where somebody declared themselves to be God in the Bible, and we only use the Bible as a reference, is when Jesus declared himself to be God. And we're going to take a look at when Jesus had been captured and he was found in the Sanhedrin, and we're going to look at what they accused him of blasphemy. Of course, it wasn't blasphemy because he was God, but what does this look like? Because what you're going to see is the antichrist is going to mimic Christ. That's what makes him an antichrist. So let's look at what Jesus does here. It's very important to understand what it is Jesus does to get an idea of what the Antichrist will be doing. Matthew 26, and we're going to pick it up in verse 57. And those who had laid hold of Jesus led him away to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were assembled. But Peter followed him at a distance to the high priest's courtyard, and he went in and sat with his servants to see the end. Now the chief priests, the elders, and all the council sought false testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. Even though many false witnesses came forward, they found none. But at last 2 false witnesses came forward and said, "This fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days." And the high priest arose and said to him, "Do you answer nothing? What is it that these men testify against you?" But Jesus kept silent. And the high priest answered and said to him, "I adjure you by the living God that you tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God." Jesus said to him, "It is as you said. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes, saying, "He has spoken blasphemy. What further need do we have of witnesses? Look now, you have heard his blasphemy. What do you think?" They answered and said to him, "He is deserving of death." Then they spat on his face and beat him, and others struck him with the palms of their hands, saying, "Prophesy to us, Christ. Who is the one who struck you?" Now ultimately what's taking place here is the high priests and all the elders, they accused him of blasphemy. Why? Because he declared himself to be the Son of God. That is exactly what the Antichrist is going to do. He's going to do the exact same thing, and he has been given authority by Satan and will be possessed by Satan, which is why he's given authority by Satan to be able to do this. Now, how do we know? How do we know that this is kind of what Satan's plan is? Because it's clearly spelled out in Isaiah. If we take a look at Isaiah 14, starting in verse 12, "How you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning, how you are cut down to the ground, you who weaken the nations. For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God, I will also sit on the mountain congregation on the furthest side of the north, I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, I will be like the Most High." That's what's in Satan's heart. His desire is to be like the Most High. And that's exactly what this blasphemy is going to look like. He's going to sit in the temple. He's going to declare himself to be the Christ. He's going to declare himself to be God. And he will be given authority over the entire planet. Now, what does he do with this authority? Well, it's pretty clear. It's spelled out, real obvious, that he's going to take that authority and he's going to use it to war against the saints. Well, why? The whole world will worship him. The whole world will bow down to him and say, "That is the Christ. Look over there." Just like Jesus said in Matthew 24, "Look, there he is in the temple. There is the Christ." Just like Jesus said they will do. But there will be a few. There will be a remnant of Jesus Christ, the saints, who will say, "That is not God." I don't know what that thing is. Probably the dragon, but it is not God. And of course, that is not going to bode well for the Antichrist, and he will war against them for 3.5 years. And we spent a lot of, that's what the tribulation is. It's the few, it's the remnant of Jesus Christ standing up for Jesus while the rest of the world bows down to the Antichrist, and then all that anger and hatred is going to be turned straight at you and I, the saints. And what does that look like? And we've talked about this a lot. Well, if we go back to Revelation 4, if we go back to Revelation 7, starting in verse 9, "After these things I looked, and behold, a great multitude which no one could number, of all nations, tribes, peoples, and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palm branches in their hands, and crying out with loud voices, saying, Salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb." And then let's jump down to 13. "Then one of the elders answered, saying to me, Who are these arrayed with white robes, and where did they come from? And I said to him, Sir, you know. So he said to me, These are the ones who come out of the great tribulation and washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb." These are those who are killed by the Antichrist. There's going to, and again, we've talked about this a lot. Go back and look at the two witnesses. You're going to have 144,000 Jews marked by God. And then you're going to have a multitude of nations, tribes, and tongues professing Jesus Christ Lord, not that guy. And then there's going to be war against the saints. But good news, we prevail for 3.5 years. God gives us some amazing powers to prevail. There's nothing the world can do to stop us from professing Jesus Christ as Lord. And it's such a hard battle for them to prevail over the saints that after 3.5 years, once God takes his protection off of us, and the only reason he does that is because the rapture is coming and Jesus is coming. But once he takes that protection off and they have the victory finally after 3.5 years, they celebrate like it's like a new Christmas to them. It's this new season of celebration. They exchange gifts and they party because these terrible saints who were professing Jesus is God is finally gone, and are now we all can then go back to worshiping the beast. But of course, that's not how it's going to play out. After 3 days, we're resurrected, where we're raptured up, where we receive our glorified body, and the return of Jesus comes, and we reign on earth here for 1,000 years. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. But what's taking place here in Revelation 13 is the beast of the sea. It's a 10-kingdom world order. One of those kings is going to be given authority by Satan. He's going to take a fatal head wound, and he's going to show up to work the next day. Now keep in mind, I said this last couple episodes, Satan cannot resurrect people from the dead. Only God can do that. So it's an image. They make an image of the beast. When we get into the next beast we're going to talk about shortly, the beast of the land, that guy is the one kind of pulling all the strings, showing to worship this other guy. It's really a creepy thing. But guess what? The whole world falls for it, and they worship him, and they love him, and they adore him, and they can't stand the people declaring Jesus Christ to be Lord. So that's where we're at. We're going to take a look at this. We're going to continue to dig through these. I think we got one more episode on the beast of the sea before we get into the beast of the land. But how do we know that we're on the right side of things? Well, how do we know? Let's jump into 8. And all who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundations of the world. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. Now, as we've seen time and time again in Scripture, Jesus said it multiple times, is that there will be people who will profess Jesus, but they're not following Jesus. They're going to say, well, hey, when Judgment Day comes, they're going to say, well, God, I worship you. And he's going to say, I did not know you. So don't be fooled. Just because somebody's going to church and just because somebody says they're a Christian, most of those people are going to be following the Antichrist, easily following the Antichrist, because he's going to feed them the political desires they want. He's going to feed them all of their desires that they want. And then when they see him resurrect himself from the dead, which doesn't happen, it's a trick, using trickery, they're going to worship him. And they're going to love it. They're going to embrace it, and they're going to love it. And everything that they said they believe is going straight out the window. Only the remnant of God will stand for the truth of God and say, you know what, that guy, I don't care if you cut my head off. That is not God. Those will be the few that will then stand next to God in all his glory in that throne room, just like we were meant to do in the beginning. Love to hear your thoughts on all this. Put it in the comments below. If you like this video, click like and subscribe. If you feel called to support this channel through Patreon, that link is below. But the most important part of this channel is we take prayer requests. So please don't ever hesitate to send that in. Thank you for watching this episode of God, Family, and Guns. And as always, love God, love your family, and love guns.